Okay, so tonight we're going to pick back up with Genesis 40. If you'll remember, Joseph is imprisoned after having been falsely accused of attempted rape of his master Potiphar's wife. Sometime later, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt offended their master, the king of Egypt. Pharaoh was angry with his two officials, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker, and put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard, in the same prison where Joseph was confined. The captain of the guard assigned them to Joseph, and he attended them. After they had been in custody for some time, each of the two men, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were being held in prison, had a dream the same night, and each dream had a meaning of its own. When Joseph came to them the next morning, he saw that they were dejected. So he asked Pharaoh's officials, who were in custody with him in his master's house, "Why are your faces so sad today?" "We both had dreams," they answered, "but there is no one to interpret them." Then Joseph said to them, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams." So the chief cupbearer told Joseph his dream. He said to him, "In my dream I saw a vine in front of me, and on the vine were 3 branches. As soon as it budded, it blossomed, and its clusters ripened into grapes. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes, squeezed them into Pharaoh's cup, and put the cup in his hand." "This is what it means," Joseph said to him. "The 3 branches are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your position, and you will put Pharaoh's cup in his hand, just as you used to do when you were his cupbearer. But when all goes well with you, remember me and show me kindness, mention me to Pharaoh, and get me out of this prison. For I was forcibly carried off from the land of the Hebrews, and even here I have done nothing to deserve being put in prison." When the chief baker saw that Joseph had given a favorable interpretation, he said to Joseph, "I too had a dream. On my head were 3 baskets of bread. In the top basket were all kinds of baked goods for Pharaoh, but the birds were eating them out of the basket on my head." "This is what it means," Joseph said. "The 3 baskets are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift off your head and hang you on a tree, and the birds will eat away your flesh." Now the 3rd day was Pharaoh's birthday, and he gave a feast for all his officials. He lifted up the heads of the chief cupbearer and the chief baker in the presence of his officials. He restored the chief cupbearer to his position, so that he once again put the cup into Pharaoh's hand. But he hanged the chief baker, just as Joseph had said to them in his interpretation. The chief cupbearer, however, did not remember Joseph. He forgot him. When 2 full years had passed, Pharaoh had a dream. He was standing by the Nile, when out of the river there came up 7 cows, sleek and fat, and they grazed among the reeds. After them 7 other cows, ugly and gaunt, came up out of the Nile and stood beside those on the river bank. And the cows that were ugly and gaunt ate up the 7 sleek, fat cows. Then Pharaoh woke up. He fell asleep again and had a second dream. 7 heads of grain, healthy and good, were growing on a single stalk. After them 7 other heads of grain sprouted, thin and scorched by the east wind. The thin heads of grain swallowed up the 7 healthy full heads. Then Pharaoh woke up. It had been a dream. In the morning his mind was troubled, so he sent for all the magicians and wise men of Egypt. Pharaoh told them his dreams, but no one could interpret them for him. Then the chief cupbearer said to Pharaoh, "Today I am reminded of my shortcomings. Pharaoh was once angry with his servants, and he imprisoned me and the chief baker in the house of the captain of the guard. Each of us had a dream the same night, and each dream had a meaning of its own. Now a young Hebrew was there with us, a servant of the captain of the guard. We told him our dreams, and he interpreted them for us, giving each man the interpretation of his dream. And things turned out exactly as he interpreted them to us. I was restored to my position, and the other man was hanged. So Pharaoh sent for Joseph, and he was quickly brought from the dungeon. When he had shaved and changed his clothes, he came before Pharaoh. Pharaoh said to Joseph, I had a dream, and no one could interpret it. But I have heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. I cannot do it, Joseph replied to Pharaoh, but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, in my dream I was standing on the bank of the Nile, when out of the river there came up 7 cows, fat and sleek, and they grazed among the reeds. After them 7 other cows came up, scrawny and very ugly and lean. I had never seen such ugly cows in all the land of Egypt. The lean, ugly cows ate up the 7 fat cows that came up first. But even after they ate them, no one could tell that they had done so. They looked just as ugly as before. Then I woke up. In my dreams I also saw 7 heads of grain, full and good, growing on a single stalk. After them 7 other grain heads sprouted, withered and thin and scorched by the east wind. The thin heads of grain swallowed up the 7 good heads. I told this to the magicians, but none could explain it to me. Then Joseph said to Pharaoh, the dreams of Pharaoh are one and the same. God has revealed to Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good heads of grain are 7 years. It is one and the same dream. The 7 lean, ugly cows that came up afterward are 7 years, and so are the 7 worthless heads of grain, scorched by the east wind. They are 7 years of famine. It is just as I said to Pharaoh. God has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. 7 years of great abundance are coming throughout the land of Egypt, but 7 years of famine will follow them. Then all the abundance in Egypt will be forgotten, and the famine will ravage the land. The abundance in the land will not be remembered, because the famine that follows it will be so severe. The reason the dream was given to Pharaoh in 2 forms is that the matter has been firmly decided by God, and God will do it soon. And now let Pharaoh look for a discerning and wise man, and put him in charge of the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh appoint commissioners over the land to take 1/5 of the harvest of Egypt during the 7 years of abundance. They should collect all the food of these good years that are coming, and store up the grain under the authority of Pharaoh, to be kept in the cities for food. This food should be held in reserve for the country, to be used during the 7 years of famine that will come upon Egypt, so that the country may not be ruined by the famine. The plan seemed good to Pharaoh and to all his officials. So Pharaoh asked them, can we find anyone like this man, one in whom is the Spirit of God? Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has made all this known to you, there is no one so discerning and wise as you. You shall be in charge of my palace, and all my people are to submit to your orders. Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you. So Pharaoh said to Joseph, I hereby put you in charge of the whole land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh took his signet ring from his finger and put it on Joseph's finger. He dressed him in robes of fine linen and put a gold chain around his neck. He had him ride in a chariot as his second in command, and men shouted before him, make way. Thus he put him in charge of the whole land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, I am Pharaoh, but without your word no one will lift a hand or foot in all Egypt. Pharaoh gave Joseph the name Zephanath-Paneah, and gave him Asenath, daughter of Potipherah, priest of On, to be his wife. And Joseph went throughout the land of Egypt. Joseph was 30 years old when he entered the service of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And Joseph went out from Pharaoh's presence and traveled throughout Egypt. During the 7 years of abundance, the land produced plentifully. Joseph collected all the food produced in those 7 years of abundance in Egypt and stored it in the cities. In each city he put the food grown in the fields surrounding it. Joseph stored up huge quantities of grain like the sand of the sea. It was so much that he stopped keeping records because it was beyond measure. Before the years of famine came, 2 sons were born to Joseph by Asenath, daughter of Potipherah, priest of On. Joseph named his firstborn Manasseh and said, It is because God has made me forget all my trouble and all my father's household. The second son he named Ephraim and said, It is because God has made me fruitful in the land of my suffering. The 7 years of abundance in Egypt came to an end, and the 7 years of famine began, just as Joseph had said. There was famine in all the other lands, but in the whole land of Egypt there was food. When all Egypt began to feel the famine, the people cried to Pharaoh for food. Then Pharaoh told all the Egyptians, Go to Joseph and do what he tells you. When the famine had spread over the whole country, Joseph opened the storehouses and sold grain to the Egyptians, for the famine was severe throughout Egypt, and all the countries came to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph, because the famine was severe in all the world. When Jacob learned that there was grain in Egypt, he said to his sons, Why do you just keep looking at each other? He continued, I have heard that there is grain in Egypt. Go down there and buy some for us, so that we may live and not die. Then 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to buy grain from Egypt. But Jacob did not send Benjamin, Joseph's brother, with the others, because he was afraid that harm might come to him. So Israel's sons were among those who went to buy grain, for the famine was in the land of Canaan also. Now Joseph was the governor of the land, the one who sold grain to all its people. So when Joseph's brothers arrived, they bowed down to him with their faces to the ground. As soon as Joseph saw his brothers, he recognized them, but he pretended to be a stranger and spoke harshly to them. Where do you come from? He asked. From the land of Canaan, they replied, to buy food. Although Joseph recognized his brothers, they did not recognize him. Then he remembered his dreams about them and said to them, You are spies. You have come to see where our land is unprotected. No, my lord, they answered. Your servants have come to buy food. We are all the sons of one man. Your servants are honest men, not spies. No, he said to them. You have come to see where our land is unprotected. But they replied, Your servants were 12 brothers, the sons of one man, who lives in the land of Canaan. The youngest is now with our father, and one is no more. Joseph said to them, It is just as I told you, you are spies, and this is how you will be tested. As surely as Pharaoh lives, you will not leave this place unless your youngest brother comes here. Send one of your number to get your brother. The rest of you will be kept in prison, so that your words may be tested to see if you are telling the truth. If you are not, then surely as Pharaoh lives, you are spies. And he put them all in custody for 3 days. On the 3rd day, Joseph said to them, Do this and you will live, for I fear God. If you are honest men, let one of your brothers stay here in prison, while the rest of you go and take grain back for your starving households. But you must bring your youngest brother to me, so that your words may be verified and that you may not die. This they proceeded to do. They said to one another, Surely we are being punished because of our brother. We saw how distressed he was when he pleaded with us for his life, but we would not listen. That's why this distress has come upon us." Reuben replied, "Didn't I tell you not to sin against the boy? But you wouldn't listen. Now we must give an accounting for his blood." They did not realize that Joseph could understand them since he was using an interpreter. He turned away from them and began to weep, but then turned back and spoke to them again. He had Simon taken away from them and bound there before their eyes. Joseph gave orders to fill their bags with grain, to put each man's silver back in his sack, and to give them provisions for their journey. After this was done, they loaded their grain on their donkeys and left. At the place where they stopped for the night, one of them opened his sack to get feed for his donkey, and he saw his silver in the mouth of his sack. "My silver has been returned," he said to his brothers. "Here it is in the sack." Their hearts sank, and they turned to each other trembling and said, "What is this that God has done to us?" When they came to their father Jacob in the land of Canaan, they told him all that had happened to them. They said, "The man who is Lord of the land spoke harshly to us and treated us as though we were spying on the land. But we said to him, 'We are honest men, we are not spies. We are 12 brothers, sons of one father. One is no more, and the youngest is now with our father in Canaan.' Then the man who is Lord of the land said to us, 'This is how I will know whether you are honest men. Leave one of your brothers here with me, and take food for your starving households and go. But bring your youngest brother to me, so I will know that you are not spies, but honest men. Then I will give your brother back to you, and you can trade in the land.' As they were emptying their sacks, there in each man's sack was his pouch of silver. When they and their father saw the money pouches, they were frightened. Their father Jacob said to them, 'You have deprived me of my children. Joseph is no more, and Simon is no more. And now you want to take Benjamin. Everything is against me.' Then Reuben said to his father, 'You may put both of my sons to death if I do not bring him back to you. Entrust him to my care, and I will bring him back.' But Jacob said, 'My son will not go down there with you. His brother is dead, and he is the only one left. If harm comes to him on the journey you are taking, you will bring my gray head down to the grave in sorrow.'" So I wanted to talk about what's going on here and a little bit of what I feel is the backstory. So oftentimes I feel that God will take us to quiet places and learning places where we can grow. And it seems like it's very seldom where we would think that we would grow or where we would want to be in a learning place. Everybody kind of wants to learn at the Hilton, but we get Motel 6. No slouch against Motel 6, but it's not where we would have booked a room if we were given the choice. And here, Joseph's learning place is being a slave in a household, completely under somebody else's whim. But God is with him there in his master's household. And even though he is under the temptation of the master's wife sexually harassing him, basically, and tempting him with her body and with sin, he is learning their resistance to that temptation. He is learning to lean on God. He is learning to go to him and trust him. And he's learning something else that's very important. Because God has big things in store. He's learning management of a household, because this is the small echoance of what happens in Egypt, where he is second only to the master of the house. There, he is in charge of everything in that household, and he gets to where it is just running smoothly, where the master of the house worries over nothing at all. He worries over nothing except for, what he might eat for dinner that night, or very, very little concern over his household whatsoever, because Joseph is running it so well. And then God does rescue him, and I'm sure he was asking for rescuing from this situation with the wife. I'm sure he was asking for that, because that was something that was coming against his entire lifehood. He could very well be put to death for that very easily. So I'm sure that was a major concern. I'm sure he went to God for that. And just as we do when we have something that's really coming up against us, that's really threatening our existence, our life, our way of being, the very first thing that we do when we go to God is we ask him to fix it, to help us. And we have probably a clear way of how we think that fixing should go. But the way that God fixed this was to move him from that household into prison. But the thing is that he blessed him there. He wanted him there because, again, an echoance, but with a larger household at this point, basically, because now he's not watching over a household, he's watching over a prison. And he becomes second only to the prison warden, which would be the master of that house. And he's running the prison like a top, so that the warden worries over nothing. He is not concerned over anything, because Joseph is doing so well at managing this larger estate. And he keeps him in this position. I don't honestly think that the cupbearer just forgot out of coincidence. I think he was meant to let Joseph learn and grow in that environment, and, see where his mistakes are, see what he could do better, how he would run things, just really get the reins in there, and also grow in a little bit of age into himself, so that he was more of a settled and mature human being, because God had gigantic plans for him, which I'm sure that Joseph didn't see as a young man running around, kind of puffed up with himself in his father's household. I mean, I don't want to think that, but he was a good-looking kid. He was muscly, and he had all the love of his father. He was the best loved, and he got the best gifts, and all of his brothers were jealous, even his big brothers, and he would run and tattle on them when they did anything wrong. He was that brother. And then now you have him growing and maturing and having those edges knocked off of him and being polished like a diamond. And so when he is ready, God sends the dream to Pharaoh, knowing that nobody else is going to be able to interpret it except for the one that he had given the spiritual gift of interpretation, and the knowledge of who to go to talk that out. And so here comes Pharaoh's dream with this gigantic thing that God is going to do to Egypt. And he's doing that for a purpose as well, because he's going to move the seed of the Israelite clan, to Egypt. And this is how he's going to do that, because that Jacob's pretty settled where he's at. He's pretty happy there. He's not having any plans to move. So it's going to take something big for him to move his entire household of 70 people and all of his animals and everything else. And he's an older guy, and, that's probably not going to happen unless something big happens, and here it is. So God has decided to send 7 years of absolute fruitfulness. And Joseph is brought, he interprets this dream, tells Pharaoh, and Pharaoh's heart is soft toward Joseph. He sees Joseph's intelligence and wisdom, and God shining through him. Who else in Egypt has the Spirit of God? He respects that God, and he respects our God, and sees the shining through him, sees him being blessed by God, and honors it. I don't think that was any kind of coincidence whatsoever. I think that he would have been having reports from his prison warden the entire time about what kind of man Joseph was, and he would have had reports from the cupbearer about what kind of man Joseph was. And now he sees that playing out, that Joseph is intelligent, young, good looking, and fit to serve. So he puts him into that role, and I'm sure he was testing him there as well. But now Joseph is in charge of Egypt, and he is second only to Pharaoh. So once again, he is right under the boss guy, leading the entire thing. And he's going about Egypt, and God blesses him with children. And he can say, you have taken me through this. You've been with me, and you have made me forget my woes. And so often, hindsight is 20/20 in our life when we look back at the worst things that we have gone through, and if we have brought God through that with us, we can definitely see his hand there, the holding of our hand, the walking us through that. Now, if we don't have a relationship with God and we're going through these things, they remain a devastation. We didn't get the learning from them. We only got the pain. We didn't get the change. We only got the grief. It's important. Life is going to have these things in it. It just is. It was even so for his son. So there's no difference there. He understands your grief. He understands your confusion and sorrow and wondering why you're at where you're at and what's going on. And I'm 100% sure that Joseph knew he was not supposed to be in prison, couldn't figure out why he was there, couldn't figure out why he couldn't get out since he was innocent, and was doing all these good things. He's leading this entire household. He's doing all these good things for his master, and no matter how much he spun his wheels, God's answer was wait. Just wait. I'm not asking you to push the rock up the mountain yet. I'm just asking you to stand next to it and wait. And the frustration comes in when we're trying to go ahead and push that rock up the mountain before we're absolutely told to move. And then, of course, once he is in charge, he is going to be reunited with his family. And he sees them, and his heart has been changed. Now, mind you, the last time he saw his brothers, they had stuck him in a well and were intent upon leaving him there to die in the desert. And I don't know if you've been in a desert, but it's brutal. The heat is brutal. The sun is brutal. It doesn't sound like they gave him any kind of water. There wasn't any water in the well. So he had to be suffering. He was plainly said that he was calling out for them to save his life, and they ignored him. I can't imagine what that would feel like, but upon his first time seeing them, his heart has been so changed by God that upon seeing his brothers, instead of murderous intent upon them or revenge, he weeps. He weeps upon seeing them. And he calculates a plan so that he can get his family to Egypt, so that he can see his brother Benjamin. And he doesn't want to give himself away yet. So he blesses them. These men who were going to murder him, who sold him into slavery, he blesses them. He gives them not only grain that they had purchased, but he gives them supplies to go back home on their journey. So he's giving them extra there. And he also returns all of their money. So all of this is free, and he gives it back to them. And they are struck with fear over this because this first big thing that happens to them, immediately they think. And I wonder why. A little part of me wonders why they didn't look at their brother and know who he was. Because surely either they really had to believe this guy was dead, or they really had to believe that there is no way their snot-nosed little brother would have become the head honcho of Egypt. And I have to think that's a great part of it. And they just weren't expecting him, but they right up front mention that this is because this is happening to them because of their brother. But they don't recognize their brother. So he must have looked very different, or that I'm not sure what was going on there. A part of me believes that that was part of the plan as well, that they just weren't ready to recognize him until the entire plan had unfolded. And maybe that was a little bit of God's gift back to Joseph as well, for everything that he had gone through. And of course, when they get back, the sons are telling their father what's going on, that they can't return back to Egypt without their brother. And of course, this is going to stick an arrow into Jacob's heart, because his most beloved son is dead to him, and his second most beloved son he kept behind because he didn't want anything to happen to him. And here the rest of his sons are saying, now you have to give him up too, so that we can go back. And it's all kinds of trouble. So I feel so bad for this father. I really feel bad. I mean, it's kind of his fault, but it worked out exactly how it's supposed to. So I believe that God sees what we're going to do and uses it for his plan. So he's worried about what's going to happen, and is currently refusing to let his son go back. And we'll have to see how that works out. But it's amazing to see what God takes us through, how he trains us to do what he is needing us to do. And he gives us these little things which we could sit and complain and whine and moan about. I mean, Joseph could have gotten lost in becoming a slave. He could have gotten lost in being the victim of his brothers. He could have given himself over completely to victim mentality and poor me'd himself right into the grave, and God couldn't have used him. He couldn't have used somebody who was totally focused on himself to lead Egypt back to where it needed to be through a famine. He couldn't have done that. He needed somebody who was molded to listen to him. And Joseph did that in this little tiny thing. He did this in becoming a slave when he didn't know what he was doing, and learning to do things so well that his master had no concern over the household. He did this again when he was wrongfully accused and thrown into prison. This would have been 10 times worse after all the good stuff he was doing in the master's household, and trying so hard to be righteous and to not give in to temptation, not to give in to sin. It could have very well seemed like God had abandoned him to this prison journey and left him there and threw away the key. But that was absolutely not the case. It's just sometimes you can't see. For now, I know what I'm doing. You don't know what I'm doing, but soon you will. And Joseph definitely didn't know what God was doing there. But he continued to be faithful and just kept plugging away. And he did try and put things out for himself to the cupbearer and say, hey, remember me. I'm sure he must have said things to the warden, and I'm Sure, he was showing himself to be worthy at all the time, because I'm sure these people gave good accounts of him. The cupbearer gave a good account of him to Pharaoh and let him move into a higher position. But each time he was put as second in command. And honestly, he started life that way because he was his father's favorite. So he was almost like a second in command in that household, and he was bungling it badly. He was proud, and he was a tattletale. He created dissension and uproar to the point where his brothers were going to murder him, literally murder him. Now, I have seen siblings. I don't have any brothers or sisters myself, but I've definitely had friends I was close to and family members I was close to, and it's not always a picnic to be close to people. And I can't imagine being so angry with those people that I would want to literally take their life. So I can't kind of imagine what was going on in that household, but it seems kind of like Joseph was bungling it a little bit, and so he was taken out of that situation to learn. And it's just amazing what God teaches us, and I definitely encourage you to ask him into your heart, to start your journey with him, because it's amazing. You didn't come here by accident. You are curious for a reason. If you don't believe me, read John 6:44. You are not called without a purpose. Your heart isn't tugged without reason. And God loves you very much. All it takes is a quick prayer, asking Jesus into your heart. All you have to say is, Jesus, I ask you into my heart. I need you in my life. Please forgive me for my sins. And I love you. Just be a part of my life. I need you. And I ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. And your journey begins. And it may not seem like anything. It may not seem like anything. It may just seem like words floating out into the universe, but it's everything. It is absolutely everything. If you've prayed that prayer, please get yourself a Bible. If you cannot afford one, I completely understand that. There are thousands of Bible apps online. There's also free Bibles through YouVision online, or you can hook into your local church. I am 100% sure your local church will provide you with a Bible, because we want you to be armed for your new life. All right, well, thank you so much, and you have a wonderful evening.